Blinken and Chinese counterpart meet in first face-to-face since spy balloon shutdown. Reporter shares what Blinken and Chinese Foreign Minister discussed. CNN, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with China's top diplomat Wang Yi on Saturday in the first face-to-face between senior U.S. and Chinese officials since the U.S. military shut down the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon earlier this month. In a meeting on the sidelines of the München Security Conference, Blinken directly spoke to the unacceptable violence of U.S. sovereignty and international law, and said the incident like the balloon which hovered over U.S. airspace for days before the U.S. shot it down off the coast of South Carolina must never occur again. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a statement. Blinken, who a senior State Department officer characterized as very direct and candid throughout, began the hour-in meeting by stating how acceptable and irresponsible it was that China had flown the balloon into U.S. airspace. The secretary later expressed disappointment that Beijing had not engaged in military-to-military dialogue when the Chinese balloon incident occurred, the senior official told the reporters. He candidly stated our disappointment that in this recent period that our Chinese military counterpart had refused to pick up the phone. We think that's unfortunate, and that is not the way that our two sides ought to be conducting business, the officer said. There was no formal agreement reached, however, on any kind of mechanism to increase the dialogue between the two countries. The diplomatic fallout from the balloon incident had been stripped, with Washington accusing China of overseeing an extensive international surveillance program. Beijing has denied those claims and in turn accused the US without providing evidence of flying balloons over its airspace without permission. China maintains that each balloon, which U.S. forces identified and then downed earlier this month, was the civilian research aircraft accidentally flown off course. Wang confirmed that what he called an informal meeting with Blinken on Saturday and called on the U.S. to repair the damage to the country's relations, according to a press release broadcast by CGTN, which is the Chinese state media outlet. Earlier, Wang had criticized the United States handling of the incident, calling the response absurd and hysterical and 100% in abuse of the use of force. The incident had the immediate impact on what had been seen as an opportunity for the US and China to stabilize the relations. In early February, Blinken postponed an expected visit to Beijing after the balloon floating over the US in plain sight dominated media headlines and public attention. The visit would have been the first to China by the US Secretary of State since 2018 on the heels of the relatively amicable face-to-face between the US President Joe Biden and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping at the Group of 20 summit in November. Biden said Thursday that he expects to speak with Xi about the balloon, but that he will not apologize for the shooting it down. I hope we are going to get the bottom of this, but I make no apologies for taking down that balloon, he said. Blinken raised the possible conversation between Biden and Xi, according to the State Department officer, who said the U.S. officials have not heard anything in recent days that would change the U.S. assessment that the balloon was for Chinese surveillance. We haven't heard anything that provides any kind of the credible explanation for what this balloon was. The U.S. stands firmly behind our assessment, the official said. Some analysts believe that Beijing, economically drained by its now abandoned zero-COVID strategy, had been softening its tone on foreign affairs and upping its diplomacy with the Western government in the bid to win back lost ground. While expectations for substantial breakthroughs were low, Blinken's trip was supposed to build a flow for fraught US-China relations and prevent the tensions from veering into open conflict. Guardrails intended to keep like the suspected surveillance balloon from escalating into a full-blown demo- diplomatic crisis. CNN reported Wednesday that U.S. intelligence officers are assessing the possibility that the balloon was not delivered to the maneuvers into the continental U.S. by the Chinese government and examining whether it was diverted off course by strong winds, according to multiple people briefed on the intelligence. Any intelligence suggesting that the balloon's path into U.S. may have been unintentional could potentially ease tensions between the two nations. Visiting Russia, Wang, who was named Xi's top foreign policy advisor last month, has already visited France and Italy this week and is expected to visit Russia after the München conference. The trip will be the test of Beijing's attempt to strike the diplomatic balancing act between boosting relations with the West and maintaining close ties with Moscow. Blinken and Wang on Saturday discussed Russia's invasion of Ukraine with the U.S. Secretary of State, warning about the implications and the consequences if China increases its support for Russia's war effort, according to Price's readout of the meeting. The senior State Department official told the reporters that Blinken was quite blunt in warning about the implications and the consequences of China providing material support to Russia or assisting Russia with systematic sanctions invasion. U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence told the CNN earlier Saturday that the U.S. has recently begun seeing disturbing trendy lines in China's support for Russia's military, and there are signs that Beijing wants to creep up to the line of providing lethal military aid to Russia without getting caught. Those officials do not describe in detail what intelligence the U.S. has been suggesting a recent shift in China's posture, but said U.S. officials have been concerned enough that they have shared the intelligence with their allies and partners in München over the last several days. China's relationship with Europe has come under significant stress in the wake of the Ukraine war. Beijing has refused to condemn the invasion outright or support numerous measures against it at the United Nations. China has also continued to partner with the Russian military during large-scale exercises while boosting its trade and fuel purchases from Moscow. According to China's foreign ministry spokesman, Wang's visit to Moscow will provide the opportunity for China and Russia to continue to develop their strategic partnership and exchange views on international and regional hotspot issues of shared interest. A catch-all phrase often used to allude to topics including the war in Ukraine. The foreign ministry did not specify whether Wang would meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. China is ready to take this visit as the opportunity and work with Russia to promote the steady growth of bilateral relations in the direction identified by the two heads of state, defend the legitimate right and interest of both sides, and play the active role for world peace. Spokesman Wang Wen being said. Wang's visit may also foreshadow a state visit by Xi to Moscow later this year. Putin extended the invitation to Xi during a customary end of the year call between the two leaders, but China's foreign ministry has yet to confirm any plans. Blinken, who reiterated Saturday the U.S. unchanging policy regarding Taiwan and underscored the importance of maintaining peace and stability with the democratically ruled island, reinforced statement from Biden that the U.S. does not seek the conflict with China, but will continue to stand up for our values. The secretary reiterated by President Biden's statement that the U.S. United States will compete and will unapologetically stand up for our values and interests, but that we do not want to conflict with the PRC and are not looking for a new Cold War, Price said in a statement. The secretary underscored the importance of maintaining diplomatic dialogue and open lines of communication at all times. This story has been updated with additional development. CNN's Natasha Bertland and Larry Register contributed to this report.